The first night after a shipwreck is not what usually breaks people. The human body is a remarkable machine, capable of incredible feats when flooded with the potent cocktail of survival hormones. It's the second. Most survivors make it through the initial wreck on pure adrenaline. The body floods with stress hormones like cortisol and epinephrine. The mind locks onto one simple primal objective: stay alive until rescue arrives. During those first hours, the brain is still operating in what psychologists call the acute survival phase. Decision-making is sharp, focused on immediate threats and opportunities. Movements are purposeful, aimed at conserving heat and energy. Hope is still a tangible asset, a beacon expected just over the horizon. But something changes after the second sunset. The adrenaline has worn off, and the stark reality of the situation settles in with the cold. Maritime survival reports and survivor interviews reveal a disturbing pattern. When rescue does not arrive by the second night, many survivors experience a sudden and dangerous psychological shift. This is where the battle ceases to be against the ocean and becomes a battle against the self. It's not the waves, it's not the sharks, it's the darkness. On the open ocean, darkness is absolute. There are no streetlights, no shoreline glow, no reference points. The horizon disappears completely, and with it, the brain loses its primary tool for spatial orientation. This sensory void is profoundly disorienting. This is where what some survival researchers informally call the second night syndrome begins to emerge. It's a cascade of physiological and psychological failures. By this point, dehydration is already quietly advancing. Even mild dehydration, just 2% body water loss, begins to impair cognitive function. Reaction time slows. Emotional regulation weakens. Anxiety becomes harder to control. This is why survival doctrine is uncompromising. Never drink seawater. The salt content will accelerate dehydration, causing kidney failure and delirium. The only viable strategy is to meticulously ration any fresh water, taking only small sips, or to improvise a rain catch system using clothing or raft material. Now combine that creeping cognitive decline with total isolation. Human beings are not wired to float alone in a black ocean for hours. Our nervous system evolved to interpret deep darkness and isolation as immediate threat signals. The longer rescue fails to appear, the more the brain begins to reinterpret the situation from a manageable crisis to a hopeless tomb. Hope starts to erode, and when hope erodes, behavior changes from rational to desperate. Survivor accounts from multiple maritime disasters describe the same sequence. During the first night, most individuals remain relatively controlled. They conserve energy. They follow basic survival logic, huddling for warmth, staying with the raft. But during the second night, reports of panic, irrational swimming attempts, and hallucination-like experiences increase sharply. The silence plays a major role. In storms, the brain has something to fight. Noise creates a sense of active danger, but also focus. In contrast, calm dark water creates what psychologists call sensory deprivation conditions. The mind, starved of external stimuli, begins to fill the silence on its own. Some survivors report hearing engines that aren't there. Others describe seeing lights on the horizon that later prove to be stars or bioluminescence. A few documented cases even describe individuals attempting to swim toward imagined rescue vessels, a fatal miscalculation born from a brain desperate for stimulus. This is not weakness, it is neurobiology under stress. As dehydration progresses and body temperature begins to drop, even in relatively warm water, the brain's ability to maintain rational risk assessment deteriorates. This is hypothermia's insidious effect. To combat it, survivors must minimize movement, protect the head and neck where heat loss is greatest, and huddle together if possible. Using the flotation device to keep as much of the torso out of the water as possible can be a life-saving thermal decision. The ocean does not need to act quickly, it waits. By the second night, fatigue compounds the problem. Most survivors have had little or no sleep. Cortisol levels remain elevated. Blood sugar drops, muscles begin to stiffen from prolonged immersion, and most importantly, time perception begins to distort. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel endless. This is where mental discipline becomes the primary survival tool. The trained survivor fights back. They anchor their perception by focusing on a fixed point, like a constellation or Polaris. They break down the endless night into manageable 5-minute blocks. They control their breathing, inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, to calm the nervous system. Without these anchors, the brain loses its internal clock accuracy. This creates a powerful psychological pressure, the feeling that rescue is taking far longer than it actually is. That perception alone has pushed survivors into fatal decisions. Instead of conserving energy, they give in to despair. But the prepared mind has a checklist. It focuses on making itself findable. A whistle blown in sets of 3. A signal mirror, or even a phone screen, flashed toward any perceived light or sound. A flare, or chemical light stick, is saved for the moment a ship or aircraft is confirmed, not wasted on a phantom light. In multiple historical shipwreck cases, investigators noted that individuals who left flotation or attempted long swims often did so after extended periods of darkness and isolation, not during the initial wreck chaos. Their perception had failed them. In other words, the ocean often wins later, not in the crash, not in the storm, but in the quiet hours when the human nervous system begins to unravel. Experienced mariners and military survival doctrines understand this. Training increasingly emphasizes mental discipline, rehearsing these checklists and psychological anchors for exactly this reason. After the first 24 hours, survival is less about muscle and more about mindset, because the second night is when the real test begins, not of strength, but of perception. The ability to endure the quiet, to manage the body's decline, and to make yourself findable when the sun finally rises. And the ocean has a way of waiting until perception fails. Respect the water, because it rarely rushes, it simply endures, waiting for you to break. The challenge is to endure longer,